A young, arrogant white female architect taunts an older, quiet black female janitor, challenging her to a design demonstration. The entire prestigious firm is about to witness a lesson no one saw coming. "Hey, you there cleaning the reception area? How about a quick demonstration?" called out Olivia Sterling from the center of the bustling modern design studio, her impeccably tailored white blazer gleaming under the ambient lighting. "I bet you've never seen real design work in your life, have you?" Maria Jenkins paused, her mop resting against a gleaming floor tile, and slowly looked up. At 58, she had been working as a janitor at Sterling Finch Architects for only 3 months, always arriving after hours when the senior designers had already left. But on that Tuesday morning, a critical client presentation had run late, leaving a few key architects still present. "I don't want to bother you, Miss Sterling," Maria replied calmly, returning to scrub a stubborn coffee stain near a sleek glass wall. "Just finishing up here so you can get back to it." Olivia let out a loud theatrical laugh that echoed through the high-ceilinged studio. "Everyone, look at this! The lady's afraid to even step into the creative zone. I guess some people just aren't meant for innovation." The 6 junior architects present chuckled nervously, some clearly uncomfortable with the situation. What Olivia didn't know was that Maria had spent the last 30 years trying to completely forget who she really was. 30 years since she left the world of architecture after an incident that changed her life forever. 30 years keeping a secret that not even her estranged adult son knew about. "Come on, Maria," Olivia continued, approaching her with that arrogant smirk she used to intimidate new hires. "Just a little demonstration. I bet you don't even know how to sketch a basic floor plan. How about showing my team the difference between someone who designs and someone who just cleans?" Maria felt that familiar sensation in her chest, like a dormant circuit awakening after years of inactivity. Her eyes met Olivia's briefly, and for a split second, something passed between them that made the young architect take an involuntary step back. "Just an educational demonstration," Olivia insisted, now trying to hide the sudden uncertainty in her voice. "Nothing too serious, just to show the apprentices why it's important to respect the profession." Maria set the bucket on the floor and stood up slowly. Her movements had a quiet grace that was strange for someone who had supposedly never engaged with complex blueprints before. Around the studio, the junior architects stopped their discussions, realizing that something significant was unfolding. "All right," Maria said finally, her voice calm like the surface of a deep pond before a ripple. "But when we're done, you're going to apologize to all of them for turning this studio into a spectacle." Olivia laughed, but this time the sound was a little forced. "Apologize, Maria? You're going to be the one apologizing to the floor when you're cleaning up your own mistakes." What none of those people knew was that Maria Jenkins had once been Maria the Blueprint Jenkins, a 5-time International Architecture Award winner and the visionary behind some of the world's most iconic, yet anonymously credited structures. She had retired at the height of her career after a project accident that cost the life of her best friend and structural engineer Sarah the Sturdy Davies. Since then, she had sworn never to design again. But some promises are made to be broken when dignity is at stake. Olivia adjusted her pristine blazer with a theatrical gesture, clearly savoring every second of attention. "Everyone gather around. You're about to see a practical demonstration of why there is a hierarchy in the world of architecture." Maria watched as the 6 junior architects formed a semicircle around the drafting table. Some seemed eager for the demonstration, others visibly uncomfortable. A young black man with dreadlocks, his name tag reading Ethan, muttered something to his classmate next to him who just shook his head in disapproval. "Look, everyone," Olivia continued, gesturing dramatically. "Here we have a perfect example of someone who never understood that there are appropriate places for certain types of people. Elite firms are not for, well, you know." Maria felt that familiar twinge in her chest, the same one she had felt 30 years ago when she heard similar comments about designers who didn't fit the mold of success. The difference was that now at 58, she had learned to turn anger into fuel for something much more powerful than witty comebacks. "Miss Sterling," Ethan interrupted timidly, "maybe we can continue our normal design session? It's getting late. And, Ethan Price, are you questioning my teaching methodology? Olivia cut him off sharply. Sit down and watch. You'll learn more in the next 5 minutes than in a month of conventional training. Maria noticed how Olivia used the young man's full name, a clear demonstration of authority. She also recognized the look of fear in his eyes. The same look she had seen in the mirror 3 decades ago, when she woke up in a panic, remembering the accident that took the life of Sarah the Sturdy Davies, her best friend and project partner. Sarah had died because of her. It was that simple. A series of miscalculated loads that Maria had rushed during a late-night session. Sarah fell through an unfinished floor, hitting her head on the foundation, and never woke up. The investigation concluded it was an accident, but Maria knew the truth. She had lost focus because of the pressure and the subtle racist comments from the senior partners about her unconventional approach. So, Janitor, Olivia sneered, how about showing my students how to sketch a basic column structure? Or is that too complicated for someone who only knows how to push a mop? Laughter echoed around the studio, but Maria remained motionless. Her eyes closed briefly, and for a moment, she was back in that high-rise in London, hearing the same kinds of comments that preceded the tragedy that changed her life forever. What's the matter? Are you scared? Olivia insisted, now circling Maria like a predator. Or are you just going to stand there like a broken blueprint, like you do with a squeegee all day? That was when Olivia made her first fatal mistake. She pushed Maria lightly on the shoulder, a seemingly harmless touch, but one that carried all the arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions. Maria absorbed the push without moving an inch. Her feet remained planted on the ground like ancient oak roots. And Olivia felt as if she had tried to push a concrete wall. The architect's arrogant smile faltered for a split second. Interesting, Maria muttered, more to herself than to Olivia. It's been a while since someone tried to provoke me like that. There was something in Maria's voice that changed the atmosphere. It wasn't threat or anger. It was the frightening calm of someone who had walked through much darker valleys and emerged transformed. Olivia, unable to interpret the danger signals, doubled down. Did you hear that, guys? She thinks it's interesting. How about we show her the difference between thinking and knowing? What Olivia didn't realize was that every humiliating word and gesture was awakening something in Maria that had been dormant for 3 decades. Not anger or a thirst for revenge, but something far more dangerous. The crystal-clear memory of who she really was when she stopped hiding. Ethan watched the scene with growing discomfort. There was something about the way the janitor breathed, the way her posture subtly shifted, that reminded him of the documentaries about master artisans he watched on the Discovery Channel. The calm before the creation. Last chance, Maria, Olivia announced, now clearly irritated by Maria's lack of response. Either you accept the demonstration like a professional, or I call security to escort you out. And guess what? You lose your job too. Maria opened her eyes slowly. When her gaze met Olivia's, the architect felt a chill run down her spine, as if she had just awakened a titan she thought was a harmless shadow. All right, Maria said finally, her voice low, but laden with an authority that made everyone present fall silent instantly. But when we're done, you're going to apologize to all of them for turning this studio into a circus of humiliation. Olivia laughed, but this time the sound was nervous. Explain? Maria! You're going to have a lot of explaining to do when you're out on the street. What neither of them knew was that Maria had spent the last 30 years not only running from her past, but perfecting an emotional control that had transformed her former destructive rage into something much more refined and devastatingly effective. Each new humiliation only fueled a silent strength within her, a cold determination that her former rivals knew well, but that Olivia was about to discover in the worst possible way. Olivia adjusted her posture, clearly pleased with the respectful silence that had fallen over the studio. Her 6 junior architects formed a perfect circle around the main drafting table, some eager for the demonstration, others visibly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding before them. Everyone, you are about to witness a lesson worth more than 6 months of training, Olivia announced theatrically. extending her arms like a showman. The difference between those who dedicate their lives to architecture and those who just, well, clean the floors where real designers walk. Maria stood motionless in the center of the studio. But something had changed in her breathing. Her eyes closed briefly, and for a moment, she was no longer in that firm in London. She was back at the Global Design Summit in New York 32 years ago, hearing identical comments from the audience before her world stage presentation against the renowned visionary Viktor Petrov. "Look at that little black woman," someone in the stands had shouted that distant night. "I bet her designs won't last 3 years against a real architect." Maria had won by unanimous acclaim in the second round of voting, but the victory had cost her dearly. The pressure of the racist comments had caused her to lose focus during the following structural review session, resulting in the accidental death of Sarah Davies. "So, Janitor?" Olivia sneered, now circling Maria like a predator. "How about showing my students how not to sketch a basic foundation? Or is that too complicated for someone who only knows how to push a mop?" That's when Ethan couldn't stay silent any longer. The 24-year-old promising apprentice and master's student in architectural history had spent the last 2 years documenting cases of discrimination in design for his thesis. What he was witnessing was valuable academic material, but also deeply disturbing. "Miss Sterling," he interrupted firmly, "may I ask you a question? Why exactly do you think it's necessary to humiliate someone who is just doing her job?" The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia slowly turned to Ethan, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Excuse me, Ethan, but who's teaching the class here?" "You are," he replied calmly, "but that shouldn't include racial humiliation disguised as a technical demonstration." Several students exchanged nervous glances. No one had ever confronted Olivia like this before. The architect felt her face flush with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Racial?" Olivia laughed forcibly. "This has nothing to do with race. It has to do with respect for the profession and knowing your place." Maria opened her eyes slowly. There was something in the way Ethan had spoken, in the courage of a young man standing up to established authority, that reminded her of her younger sister, Imani. She had had that same determination, that same refusal to accept injustice silently. Imani had died at 17, the victim of a stray bullet during a protest in her neighborhood. Maria was presenting in Japan when she received the news. Another person she loved lost while she pursued glory in distant studios. Another reason to abandon everything and disappear into the simplicity of an anonymous life. "Ethan," Olivia said in a dangerously low voice, "if you can't respect my teaching methods, maybe you should look for another firm. There are places more suited to people with your mentality." The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, but he stood his ground. "My internship is paid, Miss Sterling, and I believe that everyone here deserves a learning environment based on mutual respect, not humiliation." That's when Maria did something no one expected. She started to smile. It wasn't a nervous or submissive smile. It was the slow, calculated smile of someone who had just found a reason to stop hiding. For 30 years, she had carried the weight of guilt for 2 deaths that had indirectly resulted from her involvement in the design world. Now, seeing a brave young man defending principles of justice that she had abandoned decades ago, Maria Jenkins began to remember who she really was. "Olivia," Maria said finally, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made everyone in the room turn to her. "The young man is right. This isn't about architecture. It's about you trying to feel important by belittling others." Olivia spun on her heels, her face red with indignation. "How dare you lecture me about architecture? You don't even know what a blueprint is." Maria took a step forward, and something fundamental changed in her posture. Her shoulders straightened, her center of gravity lowered imperceptibly, and her feet positioned themselves in a stance that any experienced architect would instantly recognize as perfect. "Actually," Maria said calmly, "I know exactly what a blueprint is, and I know that this place stopped being a true studio a long time ago." Olivia felt an inexplicable chill run down her spine. There was something about the way Maria moved now, the way she occupied the space that awakened all of her instincts for self-preservation. But her wounded pride would not allow her to back down. "Enough talk," Olivia growled, assuming her favorite design pose, hands on hips, ready to lecture. "I'll teach you respect the hard way." Ethan watched the scene with growing apprehension, but also with professional fascination. He had documented hundreds of hours of design, presentations, and competitions for his research. And something about the way the janitor moved reminded him of the great masters she had studied in historical videos. The economy of movement, the controlled breathing, the calm presence that radiated contained power. Maria closed her eyes briefly and allowed 32 years of muscle memory to resurface. Every technique perfected, every award won, every lesson learned in the most demanding studios in the world. When she opened them again, Olivia was looking directly into the eyes of Maria the Blueprint Jenkins, 5-time International Architecture Award winner. "Last chance to apologize," Maria offered kindly, to him, to her students, and to turn this place back into a learning space. Olivia laughed, but the sound came out nervous and forced. "Apologize, Maria? You'll be begging for forgiveness when you're on the floor." What Olivia couldn't see was that Maria had already identified all of her technical weaknesses. The reliance on digital tools that stifled true spatial imagination. The tendency to over-design without practical consideration. The way she telegraphed her lack of hands-on experience with micro-movements of her drawing hand. 32 years away from the studio had not erased decades of refined technical analysis. Ethan noticed that other students were instinctively backing away like wild animals sensing an impending storm. Something in the energy of the room had completely changed, as if the air had become electrically charged before a lightning strike. It was when everyone laughed at Olivia's latest taunts that something unexpected began to take shape in Maria's expression. Not anger or a desire for revenge, but the calm determination of someone who had found a cause worth breaking a 30-year vow of silence for. Some of those present began to realize that something extraordinary was about to happen, even without fully understanding what their eyes were witnessing. Olivia assumed her favorite design pose, the one she had used to intimidate hundreds of new hires over the years. Head high, arms crossed, weight slightly forward. The classic stance of someone who had learned architecture in controlled environments against predictable design briefs. Maria stood motionless for a few seconds, simply observing. Her eyes scanned Olivia from head to toe, automatically cataloging every technical detail. The stiff posture that indicated a lack of intuitive understanding. The reliance on preset templates that limited true creativity. The excessive tension in her shoulders that telegraphed every design decision before it even began. "Still waiting, Maria?" Olivia sneered, tapping her foot slightly. "Or are you just going to stand there like a broken pencil?" That's when Maria did something no one expected. She started to move. It wasn't a dramatic change, just a subtle repositioning of her body, a slight lowering of her gaze, her hands relaxing into a perfectly open, ready stance. But to anyone who knew what to look for, the transformation was instantaneous and frightening. Ethan Price felt a chill run down his spine. During 2 years studying architectural biomechanics, he had analyzed hundreds of hours of footage of great designers. What he had just witnessed was the transition from an ordinary woman to a born visionary. A change as subtle as it was devastating. "Interesting," Olivia muttered, her confidence wavering for the first time. There was something about the way Maria occupied the space now that awakened all of her self-preservation instincts. Maria took a step forward, and Olivia instinctively backed away. The movement was so involuntary, so primitive that several students noticed. A lead architect backing away from a janitor. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. "Problem?" Maria asked softly, her voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced everyone. Olivia felt the blood rush to her cheeks. Her reputation was being questioned in front of her own students. She couldn't back down now, even though every fiber of her being was screaming at her to stop and apologize. "No problem," Olivia replied, forcing a smile. Just admiring your cleaning posture. Did someone teach you that on YouTube? The joke fell flat. No one laughed. The tension in the room had become almost palpable. Actually, Maria said calmly, I learned it at a place called the Global Design Summit in New York. Maybe you've heard of it. Olivia frowned. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place the reference. New York? What kind of weekend seminar did you do there? Ethan discreetly pulled his phone out of his pocket and quickly typed, Global Design Summit, New York Architect. What he found made his blood run cold. This wasn't just any prep course. It was where the world's greatest architectural visionaries of the last 3 decades had converged. Olivia, Maria continued, her voice still calm. Last chance. Apologize to Ethan for questioning his right to speak. Apologize to your students for turning this place into a circus. And most of all, apologize to yourself for becoming exactly the kind of person that true architecture should teach you not to be. The offer of clemency hung in the air like smoke. Olivia could have chosen humility. She could have acknowledged that she had crossed a line. She could have preserved what little dignity she had left. Instead, she attacked. Olivia's first design critique was technically perfect. A fast, accurate assessment of a hypothetical floor plan, executed exactly as she had learned in the prestigious manuals. It was the kind of critique that worked against 99% of the junior architects she had mentored over the years. Maria wasn't in the 99%. The movement was so fast, so fluid, that half of those present couldn't even process what had happened. Maria simply wasn't where Olivia's dismissive gesture had been aimed. Her body had slid to the side like water flowing around a rock. And suddenly, Olivia was off balance. Her arm extended into thin air. Nice try, Maria commented softly, already repositioned and perfectly balanced. Clean technique, adequate speed. But you telegraphed the critique with your hands' micro-movements. Olivia spun wildly, trying to locate her opponent. How had someone moved so fast? Beginner's luck, she muttered, more to herself than to Maria. The second design challenge came in quick succession. A rapid-fire hypothetical. Sketch a sustainable skyscraper in 3 minutes. Design a flexible urban park in 2. Draft a multifunctional residential unit in 1. It was her favorite sequence, the one she used to finish brainstorming sessions and impress clients. Again, Maria simply wasn't there. This time, Ethan managed to follow the movement. Maria had lowered herself slightly, allowing the first challenge to pass over her head by inches, as if it were irrelevant. The second challenge found only air when she leaned back in an impossible curve, already thinking 3 steps ahead. And when Olivia threw the third with all her strength, Maria took a small step back, causing the verbal demand to pass millimeters from her ears. Interesting combination, Maria observed. Still breathing evenly. Works well against people who only think linearly, but you're leaving your conceptual framework completely exposed. After the third challenge, Olivia was starting to sweat. This wasn't normal. She had stumped thousands of aspiring architects in her life, and now she couldn't land a single challenge on a woman who had supposedly never designed before. "Stop playing and design!" Olivia shouted, launching an even more aggressive sequence. That's when Maria decided the demonstration had gone on long enough. Olivia's third attack, a desperate combination of abstract design questions and theoretical critiques, found only air once again. But this time, something different happened. When Olivia recovered after missing all her verbal blows, Maria was inexplicably closer. "How?" Olivia whispered, realizing she had completely lost control of the intellectual distance. "Olivia," Maria said softly, now an arm's length away, "do you want to know the difference between someone who learned to design in academic institutions and someone who learned in professional, real-world projects?" Before Olivia could answer, Maria did something that defied everything those present thought they knew about conceptual design. Without appearing to use any force, without any sudden or aggressive movements, she simply touched Olivia's laptop screen with the palm of her right hand, open and still. Olivia's laptop screen, showing her current complex project, went black, not crashed, not turned off. It simply reverted to a blank, minimalist default screen. The silence that followed was absolute. Olivia stared at the black screen for a few seconds, trying to process what had happened. There was no error message, just the irresistible force of someone operating on a level completely different from anything she had ever known. "That," Olivia muttered, trying to restart her software, "that's impossible." Ethan Price had stopped breathing. In 2 years of studying architectural history, he had never witnessed such a controlled and devastating display of power. There was no rage, no anger, just the clinical application of a technique she had only seen in legends. "Actually," Maria said calmly, reaching out to help Olivia by gently touching her shoulder, "it's quite simple once you understand the core principles of simplicity, adaptability, and fundamental user experience. Principles I've learned over a 32-year professional career." Olivia ignored the outstretched hand and tried to re-engage her laptop, her fingers still shaking. 32-year professional career in what? Ethan answered, his voice almost a whisper. "You don't understand who she is, do you?" Everyone turned to him, who was still holding his cell phone with the results of his search. On the screen, dozens of articles, photos, and videos confirmed what his instincts had already realized. Maria Jenkins, he read aloud, also known as The Blueprint, 5-time International Architecture Award winner, considered one of the best technical designers in history, retired, undefeated, after a 32-year career, following an accident that resulted in the death of her project partner. The impact of the words hit the room like a bomb. Olivia felt her face go pale as reality set in. She had challenged a living architectural legend. She had publicly humiliated someone who could have made her entire career irrelevant with a casual gesture. Five-time award winner? Olivia stammered, all her arrogance evaporating instantly. Maria nodded silently. "I retired at 26. Since then, I've been working whatever jobs I can find. Cleaning, maintenance, simple jobs, simple life. No spotlights, no conferences, no need to prove anything to anyone." The transformation in Olivia was instantaneous and painful to watch. The arrogant architect was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the magnitude of her ignorance. I didn't know," Olivia whispered. If you had known, would you have treated me with respect?" Maria interrupted gently. "But would you still have humiliated some other janitor? Another worker who had no credentials to defend herself?" The question cut deeper than any intellectual critique. Olivia realized that Maria had put her finger on the root of her real problem. Not ignorance about her credentials, but the fundamental arrogance that made her believe she could humiliate people based on their professions. Ethan stepped forward, his voice firm. "Miss Sterling, for 2 years, I have interned at this firm out of respect for your experience. But what I witnessed today was not teaching. It was bullying disguised as mentorship." Other students began to murmur in agreement. The revelation about Maria had completely changed everyone's perspective on what they had witnessed. "Maria," Olivia said finally, her voice laden with a humility no one there had ever heard before, "I sincerely apologize to you, to Ethan, to everyone here. I have no excuse for my behavior." Maria nodded, accepting the apology with the same grace with which she had mastered the conceptual confrontation. "Appreciated, Olivia, but apologies are only the first step. The question is, what are you going to do differently from now on?" Olivia looked around the room, seeing her students with new eyes. Some seemed disappointed in her behavior, others clearly reevaluating everything they thought they knew about respect and hierarchy. "I'll change," Olivia promised. "It'll take time, but I'll change." That's when Ethan asked a question that surprised everyone. "Mr. Jenkins, would you consider designing again? Because I think we could all learn a lot more from someone who understands that true innovation comes with responsibility." Maria smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her that morning. Maybe, but not to teach design techniques, to teach something much more important, that respect isn't earned with titles or awards, but with character. As Olivia fully absorbed the most humiliating lesson of her life, one question hung in the air. Would one morning of humility be enough to transform decades of arrogance? Or would an even deeper change be necessary for true justice to be served? 3 months later, the studio had been completely transformed. Maria Jenkins was no longer just the janitor. Ethan Price had convinced the firm owner to hire her as an architectural consultant specializing in sustainable design and ethical practice. Olivia Sterling lost half of her clients in the first month after the incident. The video Ethan had discreetly recorded spread across professional forums and social media, showing a lead architect being publicly outmaneuvered by a mere janitor. Her reputation in the architectural community was ruined. "Miss Jenkins," Ethan said after a design review session focusing on community-centric projects, "thank you for teaching me that true strength doesn't need to be displayed to be recognized." Maria smiled, organizing the concept sketches. "The best lesson I can teach is simple. Never judge someone by their profession or appearance. Everyone carries stories that can surprise us." Olivia continued working at a smaller, less prestigious firm, but now with a humility forced by public shame. She had learned the hard way that arrogance comes at a price. Sometimes justice comes quietly, like a blueprint that transforms everything without making a sound. Maria proved that true triumph is not destroying your opponent, but showing that greatness comes from character, not credentials.